Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Wendy if you're new here, and this is going to be my March wrap up. So I didn't read as many books as I usually do, but it was still pretty good by the end. I was really knocking out several books. I did a lot of audio towards the end, so I'll go ahead and get into my first read of the month. It feels like so long ago, but I read Crescent City first. And I have a whole reading vlog on this, so I'm not going to go into it too much. However, that was a spoiler vlog, so I will talk about it a little. I really liked this book. I didn't love it as much as other Sarah J. Maas books, which was kind of disappointing for me. I did end up rating it 4-star, which surprised me because I really thought this was going to be a 5-star book. But I just think she added way too many characters. I feel like it was just kind of a mess in the beginning, and she just wanted to add everything in the kitchen sink, and I feel like that really just made the book kind of sloppy, and I just didn't understand most of what was going on for like the first half. But then the second half it really picked up, but I feel like it took to about 60 to 70% to pick up, and for such a large book, I just feel like that's too long of a book, I don't know, to finally pick up, but I guess she had a lot of world building to do, so I'm hoping that the second one is better. However, I do think that it really got super crazy in the end, and the only reason I rated it 4 stars, because otherwise this would have been 3, was that the ending was insane. There was so much going on, all mayhem unleashed. It was like a movie, like a crazy movie going on, and it was super intense, and I loved every second of that. So for that reason, I gave it another star, but I would say for more than half the book, this was gonna be a 3-star for me. So that's probably the lowest I've ever rated any of her books, except I did rate Assassin's Blade a 3-star because it was just like a prequel to Throne of Glass. Other than that, everything has been 4-star or above, so a lot of people love this. It just was too many characters for me was the main problem. The next book that I got to was The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. I love Catherine Center. I adored the rom-commers, as you know if you're on my channel, and so I have talked in depth about that book. I think that really did me a disservice for this book. So many people love this book. I was not one of those people, and I was very surprised and also disappointed because I really thought I was gonna love this. The whole premise of her being the bodyguard and him being famous was such a cute setup that I really had high expectations for this, and maybe that was the problem because I went into it with such high expectations and it just fell flat for me. I gave this a 2.5 star, and I think it was mainly because The Rom-Commers was such an excellent book that was very similar to this book. There were a lot of similarities that I saw, and it was just frankly so much better. And so this was one of her older books, and I think that really made this one fall flat for me because I had just come off of a really high book of hers. I mainly didn't like it for the family. I did not like the family of his. I felt like they were very unforgiving. I'm going to try to talk vague for people who haven't read it. They were very unforgiving for the situation that had occurred with the main character, and I just think that's really unrealistic. I also think that really annoyed me, and it was obviously, you know, a situation that I don't feel like someone should get blamed for by their parents, and so that really bothered me, as well as, honestly, I felt almost the whole book like they were just friends. Like there was no romance, there was no flirting, there was no nothing, and it's not because I like clean romances, but this was like no romance. There was nothing. There was no chemistry between the two. It really just wasn't believable to me, and so it just fell flat. The next book that I read was Murder on the Orient Express. I do not have that book, but I will put a picture up, by Agatha Christie. I read this for a buddy read with Gwen's Patreon. I will link her below. And I wish that I had loved this book. I know so many people do. Agatha Christie is well beloved. She is like the queen of mystery, and I haven't read any of her stuff prior, but I didn't love it. I think I'm just not really into the old school type of books. I do like some classics, so I still wanted to give it a try. You know, I love Pride and Prejudice and things like that, Anne of Green Gables, but I didn't love it. I was bored, but I also listened on audiobook the entire time, and I'm wondering if that did me a disservice, because when I watched the movie with the Patreon, I have really enjoyed the movie, and so I almost think that I missed a lot of stuff because I was multitasking while on audio, so I don't know if that really ruined my experience for it. I wish I had read it in hindsight, but overall, it was mainly just a lot of interviews and not much going on, and so that just kind of bored me. I just prefer a mystery to just have a little bit more going on, but you know, I think that if you enjoy cozy mystery and interview style, kind of like the game of Clue, then I think you would really enjoy this. Again, I think I could have probably had it ruined for me because I just did it all on audio and missed some stuff. So I'm not sure, because the Inheritance Games was Clue type vibes, but I enjoyed that way more. And I do like cozy mysteries like Ruth Ware, so I'm not really sure. It just didn't hit me in the right way. The next book that I read was the Shatter Me series, the first book, and I borrowed this from my friend Leah, which I'll also link below, and I adored this book. I know that a lot of people did not love the first book. I'm not really sure why. I think that for a first book, this was a great setup. And this is following Juliet, who has a condition where if people touch her, she will harm them, and she is not sure why. It's almost like she has this hidden power that she doesn't know how to use. It kind of reminds me of Elsa from Frozen. Literally, that's exactly what it reminds me of. And she is in some type of prison. I think it's for an insane asylum almost. And is just left there to rot. Basically, her parents abandoned her and didn't want her, and this guy shows up and is basically trying to figure out if she is truly insane or if she, you know, is truly just misunderstood. And so a romance starts up, and she ends up finding out a lot about herself while also falling for this guy. And so I really enjoyed this. I really like that it's short chapters, something that I really love about YA. So I ate it up. I read this very fast. I think it took me 2 days. Normally this would have taken me 1, but I had a lot of other stuff going on. So I really liked it. I can't wait to get into the next one. I'm gonna be reading Destroy Me, the novella before Unravel Me. And so I am excited to get to that this month, and it is definitely one that I plan on for sure reading. The next book that I read was The Teacher, which I also don't have this book because I had this on Kindle. This is by Frida McFadden. It's her newest release. It follows a school type setting where a student gets involved with a teacher, which makes it super cringy, and they're trying to figure out what's going on, and then another teacher is murdered, and then they're like trying to figure out who did it, and so much is happening, so many different storylines that we're following, as well as figuring out, like, you know, the student had kind of like a past of really messing with the teacher's record, and so it kind of sets her up to look like she may possibly be doing this herself. And so I think the premise was really great. I really was enjoying it for most of the book. Got about halfway, and then I felt like it was really cringy with the student-teacher involvement. And so I was already planning on docking it a star for that reason, but what ended up making it worse for me was actually the ending. The plot twists were very unbelievable. There were too many similarities with a couple characters, and I just kind of think she took a leap with that. Again, I'm trying to talk in code for those who haven't read, so it's very vague, but I think she really took a leap with that and making a couple plot twists with a couple characters be very similar, and that really just ruined it for me. I feel like that was just kind of just a flop on the ending, and so that is why I rated it a 3-star. The next one I read was Red Rising, which ended up being a DNF for me, sadly. I was really looking forward to this book, really excited to read this book. I did audio as well as reading, and I just couldn't get into it. I feel that I couldn't understand a lot of it. I was just not following very well. Sadly, I think sci-fi is just a little bit over my head sometimes. So it still would be a great book, I think, for a lot of people. It's supposed to have like Hunger Games vibes, but like in space. And I didn't really get to that part because I didn't get very far, but just sadly I didn't enjoy it, so it was a DNF. I got to about 30% or so, and then so that means that Golden Sun, which was on my TBR, I obviously didn't read because I didn't read the first one. So the next book that I read, which I also don't have because it was from the library, was Bride by Ali Hazelwood. And I adored this book. I gave it 5 stars. This is a werewolf vampire love story, and basically they will choose people from their species that will be basically act as collateral for them so that all the species will get along. And so they use people in their family as collateral and will give them to another species so that they will ensure basically that no one is going to harm them. And they will take someone from theirs, vice versa, which was such an interesting thing. I can't imagine my family just being like, I'm going to give you away for years so that I can make sure we're all safe. I mean, in my opinion, if that were something I had to choose, I would offer myself in place of my kids. I would never just offer up my kids. So that was insane to me. So there's humans, werewolves, and vampires, and they do this with the humans as well. So this is the first time they decide to do this with werewolves. And of course you find enemies to lovers comes in, a vampire and a werewolf. And I loved the passion in it. I loved the funniness. I feel that Misery was really funny and quirky and just like quick-witted. I loved the banter with them. I just think that I haven't had a book that I binged in a while, and I was like up late reading this, couldn't stop reading it. I was obsessed. Twilight vibes with spice. There is open door. Do not read it if that bothers you, but there isn't a lot of scenes, so it's very easy to skip past. I can see why people said it was cringy, and there were moments in the book that were cringy that they just couldn't get past, is why they rated it lower. I personally loved it still because of their love story and their passion, and I felt like it wasn't enough to bother me. I personally have read other romances that were way more cringy with humans, and so that just didn't bother me. So I understand, but also I just think their love story was epic enough that that was kind of like a side thing to me. The next book that I read was, I believe, Homefront. So that was Kristen Hanna's backlist Homefront, and I read this for Summer's Readathon Books and Bows. I will link her to below. There is also lots of videos you can go watch on Books and Bows. I'll link all those videos of some of my friends that did those. I loved Books and Bows Readathon. I thought it was so fun. If you saw me posting lots of pictures of me with a bow, of me reading or my book with tea and different stuff, there were so many fun photo prompts, and I just thought it was such a good time to do that with everybody. And so this was for my bow prompt. You could pick something with a ribbon that could be tied into a bow, so there's my ribbon. I loved this book. I always loved Kristen Hanna, so it is of no surprise. If you love the woman, I highly recommend reading this book. It is another military book. Actually, I rated the women 4 stars and this one 5 stars, so if that's telling you something. The women I absolutely adored. Don't come at me. I rated it 4 stars because I felt like so many things were happening bad for the last half that it kind of made the book a little unbelievable. Like, too many bad things were happening. That is why I docked it a star. Otherwise, that would have been a 5 star for me. This was a 5 star for me because I thought the whole book was just beautiful. It gave me that 5 star feeling. I cried so much in the beginning, in the middle, and the end. It was so emotional. The family dynamic of this was just beautifully written. I felt like I really related to just reading about the kids, and what they were going through really just broke my heart. I love that they really just accurately displayed what they feel in the day-to-day and what marriage, you know, the turmoil that they can go through in marriage and with a military spouse going off to Iraq and the dad having to take over watching the kids. It was so well done. I think the biggest reason I love this book was just the beautiful portrayal of the struggles that you could go through in a marriage and with kids, and also with a military spouse. It was such a beautiful redemption story. I can't say enough about this. I feel that if you love a very moving family story, this is the one for you. There are lots of triggers, look them up, because obviously it's a war story. So PTSD, anxiety, divorce, child abuse, trauma, war, amputation, different things. Look it all up because there's a lot of triggers. But I highly recommend, especially if you love the women. 5 stars. The next book that I read, actually I read this before several of these and I forgot to mention, Happily Ever After Playlist, 4 stars by Abby Jimenez. This was the second book in the series. The first one was Friend Zone. I adored this book. I listened to it all in audio, but you know I love the famous person trope, so I'm not surprised. It was so cute. Basically, there's a famous guy who dog runs away while he is overseas and doesn't have service, and she finds his dog and is repeatedly trying to call him to get this guy's dog back to him, and he's not answering. So she ends up deciding she's going to keep the dog by the time he gets his phone back, and so they're fighting over the dog, and it is so funny. They basically have a lot of phone conversations that I absolutely loved. There was a part in the middle where it kind of got annoying to me. Just some of the miscommunication and problems that they had annoyed me in the middle. So that is why I gave it 4 instead of 5 star, but otherwise it was an absolutely great book and I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend. Audio was really good as well. Then the next book I read was Listen for the Lie, and that was a ARC from NetGalley, and I gave that one 4 stars. That took me way too long to read, but I'm just not much of a thriller person. And so I think I was just having a moment where I just wasn't really wanting to read a thriller, but I really enjoyed this book. I highly recommend for you to listen to this on audio. I think that it would have played better as an audio. And so for that reason, I gave it 4 stars because I didn't enjoy as much reading the podcast style. I think that it is much better as an audiobook, but it is a really awesome twist on a thriller. And it follows someone who was accused of murdering her friend when she was younger, but she has had amnesia during that and didn't remember what happened. And so this guy starts a podcast and is starting to interview people to figure out who really did it and to help jog her memory so that they can finally discover what happened to her friend. It is such a good book. If you love thrillers, you will absolutely love this one. Definitely pick it up. It just released. The next one I read was Before New York. This was another ARC I got from someone off of Instagram, and her book just released. It was really cute. It was closed door, clean romance, super sweet family vibes, and just wholesome. And she's basically going to New York for an interview, and she is wanting to get a job in New York, and she meets this guy through that, and it is super cute. There's no third act breakup, and so I think that if you really like clean, wholesome books, that you would enjoy this. The only thing I will say is that I feel like it was kind of cheesy in a lot of parts, weren't super believable. The beginning meeting to me was kind of just falling flat. It just did not seem believable for me. And so for those reasons, that is why I gave it a 3.5. But the last half of the book I really enjoyed, and I just thought it was super sweet. Then the last book that I read of the month was the Gentle and Lowly book. I've been reading this for a few months and it has taken me some time. This is a Christian read. I know a lot of people love this one. I gave this one 3 stars, and I think mainly just because this isn't anything new for me. A lot of it I feel like is just repetitive and stuff that I've heard before, but there were some really great chapters in here that I got a lot out of. So I still think it's worth reading, and I think a lot of people will love this. Actually, a lot of people really do love this book, but I just prefer my Christian reads to be a lot more in-depth, and so I just think it's a good book to just refresh yourself and encourage yourself. But if you're wanting a really in-depth book, I don't really think that this is the one. Also, I forgot to mention that I DNF'd was Icebreaker. This one was full of smut. I did not enjoy that. I do not like that in a book, and it had no depth, no romance to really revive any parts of the book. I could have skipped past it and kept reading if that were there, but there was just nothing. It was all smut and it was awful. And so I DNF'd that book. I do not recommend if you do not like that. So other than that, I think that is all that I had for the month. Sorry, you probably hear my kids above me. I am downstairs again. I have kids home on spring break, so all of the things, but I hope you enjoyed this wrap up. If you read any of these books, please comment below if you enjoyed them and what you thought about some of them. And if you don't know what to put, I would love for you to just put a flower emoji below since we're going into spring. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.